I think that, at the end of the day, that's all we are is I don't consider myself a salesperson. I consider myself someone who enjoys telling stories and enjoy listening to stories. And I've just gotten really good at relating with people. And I think that that's, one of the superpowers that you're eventually going to have to develop here in WFG is, listening with this twice as much as speaking with this, and listening to people and being able to fill some gaps in their lives of what they're looking for is really, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to sell the dream, right? Because a lot of people have lost touch with their dreams and their goals. Because if you were to agree, society right now is just getting beaten down by, left, right, and center of whatever you can imagine, inflation and all the stuff that we talk about to people on a daily basis. So anyways, I'm going to launch into my story. I tend to go off on tangents. It's just how I kind of go. I'm a woman. Any ladies in the audience, right, that can relate to that. And full disclosure, I had someone for my kids tonight for the 20 minutes I'm going to speak, who bailed. So my 6 and 3-year-old are downstairs eating popcorn on the couch watching a movie. So if one of them saunters in, I apologize. But this is how we know that anybody can do this business. And we got to roll with the punches. So I'll launch right into my story. For those of you who don't know me, which I'm pretty sure that hardly any of you know me, as I don't know your faces, and I love speaking to new people, right? It's all about sharing our stories over and over again to new people. And again, about your superpower, you're eventually going to have to hone in your own story, because I would venture to say that everybody on this call has a story, and we all have to get good at sharing our stories and being able to have some impact on people as we share those stories, because in turn, people are going to share theirs with us. And that's where we can start to sell the dream to them. So WFG actually came into my and my family's life 20 years ago. I've been in the business for 10, but it entered my life 20 years ago. Who on the call here, I don't see all of you because I kind of only see my face, but I'm going to kind of scroll. Who here knows Cameron Michaud by show of hands? Right? Okay, so maybe half of you, a bunch of you, I can't see you all at once. Cameron Michaud called my mom, Yvonne Fagna, 20 years ago when he got a tip from my uncle, who's my mom's brother, that she was highly dissatisfied at the bank. And Cameron had just moved to Calgary from Edmonton, and he launched into this business full time. At the time, 20 years ago, you couldn't do this part time. And so he had to call anybody and everybody that, he got a number, he had to call them. He barely knew my mom, like my mom and his mom were first cousins. And thus started the follow-up from Cameron to my mom, Yvonne, every single Sunday, you guys, for 8 months straight. And I'm not talking about the kind of follow-up where like we've all been a part of where, well, I keep calling, but they don't answer. And then so I text and they ghost me, and I followed up for 3 years, but they never actually answered, right? We've all been through those kind of follow-ups. No, Cameron called my mom every Sunday around 7 or 8 p.m. and my mom answered every Sunday just to tell him no. For 8 months straight. And at the time, like I grew up with 4 brothers. At the time, I think there was only 2 of us left at home. So my brother Jeremy and I can vouch for this. We would see the caller ID. There were no cell phones then yet. And we'd see the caller ID on the home phone and we'd say, hey, it's Michaud, don't answer it. My mom's like, well, I'll answer it. And we're like, why? You keep just telling him no. She's like, well, he's a nice man. Anyways, she kept telling him no. Thank God, you guys, that Cameron never stopped until he was going to get a yes from my mom, my stubborn mom. I guess they were both stubborn, right? Because he was relentless. And thank God that Cameron's goals and dreams were bigger than my mom's rejection to him. Because again, by show of hands, and right, my hand would go up here. How many of you would have kept going after 5 no's? After 10, after 25? Anybody? Like, that's rare, but it's a lesson for us, right? That you just never know when they're going to. And just to get him off of her back, she finally said yes on the 32nd call. Thank God he didn't stop at 31, because I shudder at the thought of where my life, where my family's life, where the ripple effect of us coming into this business where our lives would be if we stopped at 31. We need to be relentless with people, you guys, because people are hurting out there. They don't know what this business is until they enter it. They just don't. And my mom finally said yes to coming to a BPM, right? For those of you who are Zoom babies, and I don't know if you know what BPMs are, because we used to run them all the time, but it was an in-person presentation, right? God forbid we get together in person now to do presentations. My team, we pretty much do everything 100% virtually. But at the time, it was all in person. And so she went to that presentation. She said, Cameron, if I come to your stupid presentation, do you swear on the Bible that you're never going to call me again? Those are her exact words. And he said, yes, Yvonne, I'll never bother you again. And so she went that night and she signed up that night because she heard two things. Okay. And I'm going to go through her story after I say these two things that she heard. She didn't see the rule of 72, like she saw it, but she didn't actually see it. You know what I mean? She didn't see the 4 pillars or everything that we teach. She saw two things. The first thing that she saw was our mission statement of no family left behind. And the second thing that she saw was the fact that we recruit, which for the most part, when people hear that word, do they shy away, right? For the most part. Whereas my mom got so magnetized to that message because she worked at the bank for 30 years. And here was her story, because it's so important for you guys to understand that there are two systems to the industry. There's the traditional industry, and then there's WG. And we are completely different by design, you guys, by design, on purpose, because the traditional industry is broken. My mom came from it. I saw it firsthand. I don't just I heard that the industry is broken. No. Here's where my mom was at. 30 years into working at CIBC, right? It's a fact. I'm not not here to put the banks down. I'm just speaking facts. By the way, she
recording in progress.
18, right? She climbed up the ladder. She, swore to her dad without a college education that she would make it to manager, which she did. So at the age of 50, she was a manager, spread between 4 different branches, supervising 14 financial advisors, who each had, you guys, 500 clients. I have about 120 clients right now, 10 years in. And I'm starting to turn some away to my team, right? Not turn away right, see you later, I'm not going to talk to you. But I'm actually starting to give my team some clients. Why? Because I don't want to burn out with my own. Whereas that's what happens in the traditional industry. They have 500 clients each. And that equals it's going to eventually equal burnout. And half of those advisors kept going on stress leave. And my mom, as a manager, as a supervisor, had to pick up the slack. And she had to figure out a way to take care of all these clients. Can you imagine? She says this all the time, but she's never heard the F word more in those 5 to 10 years of being a manager doing that, right? Than she did her whole life. And she begged her boss, she said, Lana, can you please let me recruit more advisors? But what do you think her boss would tell her? No, Yvonne, figure it out. It's your job to do so. So what eventually happened to my mom? Oh, and by the way, just one more little thing, right? Those advisors who had the 500 clients, do you think that they took care of their top 10% or their bottom 90%? Of course, their top 10%. Why? Because they had targets and quotas to fill. Do we have targets and quotas, you guys? We don't. I love being able to help the little guy every single time, where I don't have my hand slapped, which is what happened to my mom. And all these families are being left behind, so again, coming back to the BPM, my mom saw no family left behind. She goes, what do you mean no family left behind? Because that's all we do in the industry. We keep leaving people behind. We keep chasing the top 10%, which do they really need the help at the end of the day? They already have the money. So my mom came on board that night, okay, because of those reasons. And she left the bank. So she came on board full time. And I slowly saw her change as a person. Because let me tell you, my mom at that point was not in a good place. She was suffering from deep depression, where she could hardly get up in the morning. She'd put her feet on the ground and she'd see black. I don't know if anyone can relate to that or know anybody who goes through that. She couldn't even, just to walk down the street and come back. It was just exhausting to her. She was prescribed every pill under the sun. because of her anxiety and depression. And I'm not saying, right, don't go do that. But for her, she went, I know what the problem is. She told my dad, she's like, Guy, I know what the problem is. I have to leave the bank because if I take this, I'm going to die. I know I have to, it's my environment that's making me like this. And so when she started WFG, here's what I saw. It's hard to even put into words, you guys, because it was almost night and day. In the first like month, I saw her as a different person. At night, she was like sitting up in bed beside my dad. They were having like these conversations I've never really heard them have before. She was reading personal development books and she had a smile on her face. Whereas she was lost before. She would sometimes leave the house and we'd have to go find her. Like that's how bad it was. So she kind of changed our family's life like pretty much immediately because she went full tilt to this thing. She gave it everything that she had. And from going from $1,600 a month as a manager, that's how much she was making. I know that's 20 years ago, but still, that's still pennies back then. $1,600 a month as a manager to 1 year license in the business. She was making six figures. So do you think that changed our family a little bit? Where they raised 5 kids, almost in the red every month. We were all in extracurricular activities. They couldn't afford that, but they wanted us to have a good life, but they were broke because of it. They couldn't make ends meet. And here comes WFG and kind of sweeps us off our feet and shows us that there's hope again. And so when I came on board, you guys, it wasn't right away. I was 18 when my mom started. And I know we can recruit 18-year-olds, so I technically could have come on board. And I saw what the business did right off the bat. Like I was like, whoa, this WFG thing's amazing. But there was no chance in that I was going to do this because I already had a massive passion. And Angela already said it, right? I was an opera singer. Ever since I was 3 years old, I wanted to be a singer. I didn't know that was going to turn into that. But by the time I was 16, my voice teacher started training me like that. And I became an opera singer. And that was my career. When I was 18 years old, I was winning competitions and I was flown to Europe on a scholarship. And I went to one of the best schools in the States for my bachelor's and master's. And I was flying high when my mom started the business. So there was no way you were going to recruit me then. I don't care if you were Ed Milet, you wouldn't have recruited me. And you guys have to go through your business with that in mind, with the people on your list going, well, I've talked to this person and it was like a big no, or it's like, thanks for the information, but this is not for me. Don't ever scratch them off your list, because do we all go through roller coasters in life? We all do. And at that time, I was on the high of my roller coaster. But then 10 years later, I was at a low. I wasn't making it. I was living in Toronto at the time. I was dipping my toe in the industry there because I had been in the States until then. And so Canada didn't really know me yet. And it was a struggle. My mom was paying half my rent. I was 29 years old. That's a hard pill to swallow. My dad had passed away a few months prior to me moving to Toronto. And I'll kind of go through that in a little bit. And so I was not in a good place at that point. And I won't go through why or how I started, like what made the decision, but like the light bulb finally went off. And again, that's 10 years into my mom, or 11 years into my mom doing the business. The light bulb finally went off. So again, don't discount anybody, because you might catch them when the timing is right. Timing is everything, you guys. And I'm not saying wait till everybody's at the lowest part in their lives to talk to them. Don't do that. I'm just saying, like, dollar cost average your list. I've never said that before, but it's kind of a good way of looking at it, isn't it? Dollar cost average your list. Contact your list on a regular basis so that you catch them when the timing is right. Right? You're going to catch the market when it's on sale. Catch people when they're ready. But if you just contact them once, how are we ever going to know 5 years down the line, right? You might actually see them on someone else's team because they caught them when the timing was right. So don't ever, right? Just keep following up. Fortune is in the follow-up. So when I first started, I was 29 years old. I decided to completely leave my opera industry. And the reason why was because I decided to interview my future. And if you guys haven't done this yet, and you're kind of still 1 foot in, 1 foot out of this door, and you don't know what this deal is yet, and you're so brand new, I don't know everybody on the call, right? So I don't know your story. But even if you're talking to someone who's looking at the business and hasn't started yet, encourage them to interview their future of what career they're in right now. Have you ever sat down with someone in your job who's been there 10, 15, 20 years later or longer than you? And are they happy in every area of their life? And when I looked at my industry, and I saw the women in the industry succeeding, right? Succeeding meant, right, they were constantly doing shows, traveling the world. I went, okay, if that's me in 5, 10, 15 years, am I truly going to be happy? And the answer was no. And this was the biggest reason. Was because when I was 3, I wanted to be a singer, but I also wanted, that was like, those were my 2 biggest dreams. And I wouldn't have been able to have both had I stayed in that career. I could have, I mean, like I said, I saw those women succeeding. They either didn't have kids because their career was everything, right? They literally couldn't because they were constantly traveling everywhere, and it's such a demanding career. Or they did have kids and they had to sacrifice their career, or they didn't see their kids very much. So whichever way I spun it, I went, I'm not going to have what I eventually want here, which is the lifestyle that I want. Sure, it's a glamorous, right? I love performing in front of thousands of people on stage. But you have to look at every area of your life when your life is too short. And I couldn't sacrifice that part. So when I came on board, you guys, I had 0 skill, 0 knowledge. Like, I didn't know what a rate of return was. When someone's like, what does an interest, what does a savings account pay you in interest? I'm like, I don't know. What does that even mean? I got 0. Even though my mom worked for the bank and she tried to teach me some things, I'm like, you be my advisor. I don't care. Like, take my money. I don't, right? Do it. So I had no skill, I had no knowledge, but one thing I did have was full belief in the company. And that was an advantage I came in for sure, because most people who start are brand new to the company. They don't, right? WFG, what is this? I knew 11 years in the impact of what this company did for my own family. I saw the ripple effect of my advisors, so many. But when my mom started, right? Obviously they got their stuff in order right away. Corey Michaud did a plan for them. He freed up $1,300 a month for them, right? That's like wealth to them at that point, right? $1,300, you found 13, how? And he put a plan in place. And the first thing that he did, you guys, was put insurance on them because they were 50 and 55, and their term insurance with Primerica was just about to expire. And there was no way that they could afford to buy more. But now $1,500 was found. So my dad put some insurance on them. And my dad, you guys, was rated elite. Does anybody know what that means? It means healthier than health average, right? So his insurance premium was actually lower based on his rating of elite. Got a blood test and everything. He was like 55. And mom was like, well, I'm never going to see this term policy payout, right? Because you're rated elite. I might as well get a UL on you when I start getting, making more money here, which she did. About 6 months later, she put a UL on him. He was rated elite again. She's like, you bugger, you're never going to die. 9 months after that, UL was approved. 9 months later of rated elite, you guys. And again, this is just like the power of what we do. We can't ever stop preaching. Diagnosed with cancer, rectal cancer. And for a bit there, we thought he was going to be okay after surgery, but it came back and he passed away 3 years later. And both of those policies paid out. There would have been no insurance in place. He would have still got cancer had my mom's not started WFG. There would have been no insurance in place. And all the debt that my parents accrued over 40 years of marriage, raising 5 kids. But now with $1 million paid to my mom, do you think that helped a little bit? It wiped out the entirety of her debt. For the first time in 40 years, my mom was debt free. Obviously, we would have taken my dad back over any $1 million, $5 million policy. We would have taken him back, but that's not how life works. Thank God there was insurance in place and my mom had time to grieve. She actually took a year off from the business and she was still being paid 6 figures. But with that insurance policy, it helped too. She could come see me sing opera, and my brother Jeremy played baseball in the States. So yeah, when I came on board, I had full belief in the company. I didn't have to, right? I didn't have to muster up that belief, but I didn't have skill. I didn't have belief in myself yet. I was still shy. Believe it or not, I'm introverted. I like to talk on these type of things, but like in a day, I like to curl up by myself and re-energize myself. I think a lot of leaders in this company actually are introverted. which is funny. Ed Milet's a huge introvert, but on stage you would never know it. So I knew I had to control a couple things when I started. Okay. And the first thing that I decided to do was be a student of the business. I knew I could control that. I'm like, all right, show me the ropes. Okay. So that goes hand in hand with being coachable. Being disciplined, right? Being disciplined, coachable, and being a student of business. If you have those things, you guys, you've got everything in spades. And I'm not saying that like I flew out of the gates by any means, but I was like, I took everything that I was told and I just decided to do it. Make calls. Okay. I hate the phone, but all right, I'm going to do this come hell or high water. Like, I know I'm going to get some no's, man, it's going to sting. And it did. I got a couple no's at first, and my mom had to pick me up from my puddle of tears. Like, it was right. That I went through that. To this day, I don't like making calls. I don't think anybody loves it, but I made a decision to become obsessed, you guys, with the words of the business. Because again, I didn't have the knowledge. So I had to memorize the words. I was good at that as an opera singer. I had to memorize 3-hour operas in Italian. If I could do that, I think I could memorize a 15-minute presentation. So I locked myself up in a room. And if you haven't done that, you guys, please do yourself a favor and do that for a week. Like every night, book some time with yourself, book an appointment with yourself, lock yourself in a room, practice the presentation. I don't know what version of you guys, right? But it's the who we are and what we do. And then came the rule of 72 and the 4 pillars. But once I did that, once I like from left to right and back, center, and I knew the words like in my sleep, I went, okay, mom, I don't need you anymore. Like, I might not know everything yet, but I know I can at least do the initial presentation, the initial appointment, where I don't have to be tied to your schedule. Anybody here still tied to their trainer's schedule? It's the most annoying thing. It's like, oh, okay, I'll see if that works. Hold on, text your trainer. I hated doing that. I felt so much freedom when I was free of my mom, where I could go in, do it, and then bring her in for the close where she could wrap it up. So I did 8 to 12 appointments every single week, right? Once I had the confidence after that, when I knew the words. And when you guys know the words, don't you feel like the confidence just skyrockets? Once you know the objections, oh, if they say this, I say this. All right, sweet. Once I had that, I was booking left and right. So 8 to 12 appointments every single week. And right, I was chipping away. I wasn't like there weren't huge results, but my first year in business, I was associate MVP in Banff in Corey's hierarchy, right? I was putting up some pretty good numbers as an associate. And 2 years in, like I thought for sure 2 years in of doing that, I'd be SMD. But here's where I was at 2 years in. And I need to tell this to you guys because I want those of you who are like, I'm kind of stuck. I'm doing the necessary thing, but nothing's moving. I feel you. Here's where I was at 2 years in after doing 8 to 12 appointments every week. I was still an associate. I had 1 license on my team, 1. And you're probably thinking, well, that's not the numbers. Like, you must have sucked. No, I was pretty darn good. It's just, it wasn't lining up for me of doing those weekly appointments. 1 license on my team. I was at still only 24 squares. And I had to talk to myself at that point going, thank God I have huge belief in this company, because if I hadn't seen the impact yet, I probably would have quit. But that's why you got to keep showing up, you guys. You got to keep showing, because at least if you have belief in a company, belief in yourself is going to come. The belief in the company has to come first. How does that happen? You hang around the environment. You hear the stories. You hear the good news. You just hang on tight. Because I heard this thing that was like this concept that was taught to me early on was a slight edge. I mean, that's why we're called Slight Edge. Cameron's hierarchy is Slight Edge. And then our team, right, was Slight Edge Legion. For short, we're just Legion now. But this Slight Edge concept of you do the necessary daily activities, the small things on a daily basis, compounded over time, is going to equal success. And so I knew 2 years in, I was like, I've put in the work. It's only a matter of time for this upward curve to happen. And the other thing I heard was from Ed Milet at my very first convention in Banff. We're pretty lucky to have Ed Milet as our guest speaker in Banff. I don't remember much of what he said besides like seeing the veins pop out of his neck, but he said, you're 1 recruit away from an explosion. And he like yelled that from the stage. I was like, okay, I'm gonna bank that because I know one day I'm gonna need that. I'm gonna need that message. And 2 years in, I needed that message back in my archives of all the messages that I heard. I'm one call away. I mean, you know his book, right? Power of One More. I'm one call away. I'm one person that's a conversation away. I'm one recruit away from an explosion because I was my own rabbit. I was doing the necessary thing. I needed someone else who wanted it as bad as I did. And I knew that time was coming. And the other thing that I had heard early on was keep flipping the cards because there's only 4 aces in a deck of 52 cards. There's only 4 aces. But you got to keep flipping. So I was like, okay, I'll keep flipping. I'll keep flipping these jokers. There's only supposed to be 2 jokers, but I keep flipping the jokers. When am I going to flip the aces? And then January of 2016, my started my 3rd year in business. I flipped my brother, Jeremy. I never knew it would be my baby brother. He's 9 years younger than me. He didn't make it in baseball. Like we all thought that he would, but he didn't get drafted. And he's the one that I flipped. He came on board and I didn't know what to expect, you guys, because he's like 10 times more introverted than I am, super shy, but I knew he had this burning desire. When you know that someone's got a burning desire inside of them, you've got to take that, hone it, like you got to unleash that power. I don't care how shy they are. If they have a burning desire, that's really all you need to work with. And I was so glad that in the first 2 years of the business, I was a student of the business where I could now teach him the ropes, at least teach him the words and the basics. Because once he had that, because we locked ourselves in a room, right? We went to the gym every single morning together, 6 a.m., got to the office at 9 a.m. every day. Like we were each other's running partners. And if you don't have a runner right now, find yourself one because it's so much more fun, you guys, to have an accountability partner. Because that's what we were for each other. And right off the bat, he was teaching me some things, his burning desire and his goals, his goals binder. If you ever, get to talk to him, ask him what his goals binder look like. It'll blow you away. It made me want to get way more clear with my vision. And the rest is kind of history, guys. January of 2016, I was an associate with 1 license, right? Jeremy came on board. 11 months later, I was an SMD. From 24 squares to 91, I went to SMD on 91 squares. From 1 license to 12, right? 3 of those were direct. The rest of them were, right, came from Jeremy. There was that explosion. From there came Brennan Hendricks. And we have 12 SMDs on the team, right? I'm not an EMD yet. I have 1 direct SMD. So that just goes to show you how I'm like super deep, working on going wide. But I want to tell you as I wrap up, because I know my time is ticking here, what WFG has done for me. And I'm going to get a little personal with you guys here. And I hope that's okay, because I hope that I touch someone or reach someone who knows of someone in this kind of situation. But 2.5 years ago, in the thick of the pandemic in 2021, I decided to become a single mom. And I decided to leave a toxic situation that was filled with addiction. And so many factors were going through my mind when I was making that decision on my own. But I'll tell you the one factor that never entered my mind was money. And that's not to boast. I hope that that's not you saying, well, it's great that you got money. That just like I'm boasting on this platform of WFG. Because do you know how many women out there or men, I don't want to be one-sided here, but how many people are in that kind of situation where they stay in a really toxic situation because they can't afford to leave? How many women, sorry, men, whoever, people do we know? I know a few, but I didn't have to be a prison in that situation because of WFG, because of something called passive income, because of something called building an agency. And I was so glad that by 7 years in, I had built it enough that I could leave. And at the time, my kids were 3 and 1. And I had to be 100% full-time single mom at this point, getting my feet back on the ground, where I had to take a bit of time off to do that. And WFG became my life policy. My life happens insurance policy. Because guys, this isn't a life insurance payout. It's not a critical illness payout. It's not a I own every product under the sun. I hope that you guys eventually will too, if you don't own everything that we offer. But none of those products were going to pay out to me for becoming a single mom. But WFG was going to pay out. And it paid out 15 to 25 grand every single month. That entire year that I didn't take a year off, by the way, but it's right. It's kind of that year where I had to like take a step back, kind of come in. It was not that a consistent amount of work that I was putting in at that point anymore. But that's what WFG can do to you, for you. If you meet it halfway. I'm not saying you come in and like, KWFG, come and deliver, because life is eventually going to happen to me, so you better show up. No, you have to show up. You've got to show up for your life, but you've got to show up for this business. You've got to put in the time. This vehicle, you guys, is a Ferrari. It's not a Pinto. I don't know cars, but I know that that's way less than a Ferrari. It's you've got to put the pedal to the metal in this while you can. I'm so glad I did it while I could, and I'm still doing it, obviously. I honestly don't have to. Living off the passive and residual income now as a single mom, I could put on the brakes. But you know why I'm not? Because I want to help other people win. And my mom's 70, by the way. She could retire. She's in the office every single day. Still loves what she does because it's a purpose. I love being able to share this information. I had 5 brand new appointments this past week already with a new guy on my team who's like super pumped up, and I love seeing that excitement in people. That's why we keep doing what we're doing. That's why Rich Stolley, who's almost a billionaire, keeps mentoring, because it's an addiction to see people grow, to see people win. I don't just want to win for myself anymore. I want to help other people win. So I hope that some of that, has resonated with you. I hope that you got a little bit from that. I hope you got some hope from that, from someone who had a bit of a slow and frustrating start her first 2 years, and it eventually exploded. And I don't care if it takes you 5 years for that to happen. Eventually it's going to happen, as long as you put the effort in and as long as you allow for time to those efforts to compound. You're going to win here. It's inevitable. As long as you go on doing the right things for people, for clients, for your agents, it's going to deliver. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Angela. I hope that was okay. And I appreciate you guys having me on the call tonight.
Let's give Natalie a big round of applause, you guys. Hi, Natalie. My name's Stevie. I am Angela's first SMD. Excuse my casual attire. We got some of our team on the call tonight. Lots of people studying. So in the office, we have a live open house. Greg Sternak is there. Really, really lucky to have him coming in every week to do an open house for our guests. So Angela's out doing Mozone, she's got some guests tonight. So we're wrapping up here. That was amazing, Natalie. You brought a little bit of tear to my eye and some smiles and some laughter, because being only 2 years in the business, I relate to a lot to what you said. And I love singing too, no opera, but that's fantastic. I also worked at a bank for 10 years. And I was an advisor for about half of that. And I felt like I was going to have a heart attack before the age of 30 years old. It was, I hear your mama. Yeah. So we only have a couple minutes, but I just wanted to share some of my takeaways, and then maybe we could see if anyone had a question before we pop off, if that would be okay. I drive a Ford Fiesta, so I want a Ferrari. I'm really, really excited for that. It's such a beautiful reminder that we can get comfortable no matter what, I don't know if many can relate to this, but when we get started, it's like, I just want to replace my income. And I've done that with ease. And so it can get comfortable. Then you get to your $250,000, you get to your $500,000, and you have to have that reminder, well, what is my vision? And so if no one has a question, I might ask you a question. But yeah, just the remembering we're one recruit away from an explosion. It's so cool how that happened. And then you have 12 SMDs. Like, if that doesn't speak to don't quit ever, I don't know what would, because that is amazing. Yeah, so thank you so, so much, Natalie. I got a ton. I wrote pages of notes and you spoke to my heart. And that's what WFG is all about. We're here to help people from all walks of life, and WFG can help us through those challenging times. So before we let Natalie go, did anyone have a question for her before we pop off for class? No, I've seen lots of smiles throughout your chat. Okay, I'm gonna ask you something. What? So being this